Let's see if this works. Haven't done this in a while. I just need to check the sound. Just give me a moment. Testing, testing. The sound is terrible. My god. Oh. It's running off the wrong mic, I see. Well, we'll have to fix that. Gain is way too high. Do bear with me. Let's see if it's better now. Do bear with me. Oh, way better. Way better. Way better. Absolutely. Anyways, hi. I've returned. I'm in a different space, as you can see. There's a piano here, which I play sometimes. Few things have happened as of late, which have not allowed me to really continue this endeavor of viciously screaming out into the void of the internet. But I'm back, and I am going to continue to do that. A lot has happened since I last spoke. I believe the last time I streamed, well, the last video was me talking to those anti-vax people. And my last stream was talking about Russia, Ukraine. There's been quite some developments there. I suppose I should start with that. Before I just gotta get some housekeeping out of the way. God, I sound like every professor that I've ever had. Just some housekeeping. I'm now graduated. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree in political economy, so that means that none of you can say that I'm wrong anymore. I am now smarter than every single one of you, except if you have a master's or a PhD in political science, in which case, what are you doing with your life? Anyways, so I have that. I'm currently studying education now. That's right, this raving lunatic you see on your screen is trying to be a teacher. Had quite the upset concerning employment over the past few months. I worked for Coca-Cola for a while, which was an atrocious job. My god, don't do it. It was a merchandiser, which basically the idea there is I go and I drive around to different grocery stores, supermarkets, and they have a shipment of Coca-Cola. I go and put it on the shelf. I understand that as a Marxist, working for Coca-Cola is questionable, but a job is a job. I'm sure that many of you can get behind that idea. A fella's gonna make his bread, as the kids say. And also, as the kids say, the job might not have been busting, but it was a job. It paid pretty well. That being said, everyone's talking about quiet quitting right now. I was quiet fired from this job. And what I mean by that is the way that the job worked, right, was they would put me on the schedule. There was a schedule for like which shifts you worked, right? I worked 5 days a week, and I was put on the schedule for that. But in the morning before your shift, they have to send you what's called a snapshot. They called it. I don't know why, of all of the stores that you're intended to go to, and they just stopped sending them. I had received a complaint from one of the stores, reason being that a lot of these stores, they tend to order way too much stock, and so then they have to keep all of the stuff that doesn't go out on the shelves, like, in the back room, right? And so that happened at this particular store, and they were basically angry at how much stock there was back there, which has nothing to do with me. I'm the grunt that puts it on the shelf, and I did that the best I could, and they weren't going for it, so I got a complaint, and I imagine that's why they wanted to can me. But they never actually just came out and said that I really did anything wrong. I just, wasn't sent my stores on time, and I was quiet fired. I was fired without being fired. So I had to quit, and then after this, there's quite a tumultuous time of trying to find jobs in maybe the worst state the labor market has been in a very long time, at least in Canada, at least in my particular area of the world. And so I was in a pickle, to put it lightly, but I've recently acquired a job. I'm very grateful that we live in a country where cannabis is legal. I got my certification to sell it, and that's what I'm doing now. Not on my own. I work at a dispensary, they call them. So, yeah, that's what's been going on with me. But that doesn't matter. I'm just trying to excuse myself of, not uploading these videos that nobody watches. So, I guess we should get right into it. So, Ukraine, right? Interesting direction that things have gone there. So, I'm not completely up on the geography. Let me look it up. So as of right now, it's November 21st. I put 22nd in the title. I don't know why I did that. That's my mistake. Okay, so it looks like let me do this real quick. Remove. OBS is a lot different since I last used it, so do bear with me. There we go, there it is. BBC. There we go. Okay, wait a sec. Oh my god, it's all coming back to me. Look at this. What is... okay. Held and regained by... my god, okay. So Ukraine is basically pushing Russia back over the Dnieper. Dnieper? Is that how one calls it? Dnieper River? Dnipro. I guess that's the Russian name for it, or the Ukrainian name. They're not the same language. Don't make that mistake. My god, you'll get yelled at so much. The area of the world I live in, by the way, Alberta, it's now that I have this up, it's this one. There's a pretty high concentration of Ukrainian immigrants here. A lot of them, I've actually been taking a class about Canadian immigration. A lot of them sort of from the early 20th century, a lot of it during World War I, or before World War I as well. And so, really, it's been a hotbed of debate here. I've been kind of afraid to say many things in my classes concerning this conflict, because I don't want to get lambasted for not fully towing the line, that NATO is not completely in the right in this conflict, and that Russia has legitimate claims to certain territories. That is my belief. It is my belief that this region here, this is mostly Donbass as well as Crimea, I know for sure, and I am very confident in my belief that Crimea, that Russia has claimed to Crimea. I mean, there's been referendum after referendum conducted, as well as the Donetsk and Luhansk Donbass region. Other than that, I'd say that any sort of Russian territorial ambitions are mainly for the purpose of just getting bargaining power, right? When you have a war, anyone who's played Civilization can attest to this. If you conquer more territory than you actually want, then that's good. You have more leverage, right? So, yeah, that's sort of the idea there. As for Russia's nuclear threats, I find it very interesting that the United States criticizes Russia so much for this, considering that the U.S. has held an atomic monopoly. Well, they held an atomic monopoly over the world for years after World War II. It's something that they pretty much, it was their trump card. Anyone who knows really anything about the history of atomic weapons can attest to that. But we're the good guys with atomic weapons. The only thing that can stop a good guy, or that can stop a bad guy with atomic weapons, is a good guy with atomic weapons, of course. We should be giving the atomic weapons to the teachers as well, so that they can defend themselves anyways. And so, it is pretty much just a media vacuum. It's an echo chamber. You cannot find anywhere in the Western world, particularly in the US and Canada, you cannot find any sort of editorial position that does not view Ukraine as some heroic nation which is deserving of all of its territory. That you cannot find a position, an editorial position, that the Donbass and Crimea are legitimately Russian, that their populations are majority Russian people. You simply cannot find these positions here. That being said, and I sort of add this as a disclaimer, Russia's initiation of the conflict, I think, was, it can be judged, it can be criticized. However, there is also just the reality that there was no rapprochement with the United States. The United States expressed no intention of negotiating their way out of this conflict. And as a result, my taxes, your taxes, are now going into funding this war. What has Trudeau said? Well, he's announced military assistance. That's pretty obvious. In Bali, Indonesia, for some reason. Not sure why. Canada continues to support Ukraine as it defends its territory, sovereignty, and independence from Russia. Fair enough. This additional military assistance will support Ukrainians as they bravely continue to fight against Vladimir Putin's illegal invasion. While these new sanctions will put added pressure on those who support these acts of war, we, along with other members of the international community, will continue to use every tool at our disposal to hold Russia accountable for its brutal actions against Ukraine. It's a very generic statement. It sounds very much workshopped. I'm sure that there's some marketing behind it, right? Um, who's the Minister of Foreign Affairs by now? God, it changes every bloody month, it seems. Melanie Melanie Jolie. Oh, we got a lot of French people here. Now, as for the situation with the missile hitting Poland, I don't care. It's not a big deal. It was a brief scare, but everyone knows that it was not Russia that intentionally went and struck Poland. That would be silly. They would have no real geopolitical reason to do that. So, as for it being an illegal invasion, what I expressed earlier in the year, goodness, and I'll express now, I still believe this, is there's a harsh double standard when it comes to these conflicts. It's very funny to me to see people like Justin Trudeau calling out war crimes, calling out illegal invasions, while at the same time supporting the oil oligarchy in Saudi Arabia in its crusade against the Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Houthi rebels in Yemen have never expressed any sort of interest in Canada, let alone the United States. Their interest is not in attacking NATO allies, it's not in attacking, quote-unquote, the civilized, developed world. They've never expressed any intention of attacking the imperial core. All that the Houthis really want is independence for their particular area of Yemen, which, if you remember from history, Yemen was mostly divided for most of the 20th century. I believe it would have been in the 70s that it united as a single republic. Is it even a republic? It is a republic. Unification, Civil War. When was that? Yes, I'm looking at Wikipedia. It's just for short facts. I don't do this. I promise. 1990. Yeah, it was very recent. It was very recent. Saleh is president. It's really hilarious to me that someone like Trudeau, who inherited the Saudi arms deal to sell over 900 London, Ontario produced light armored vehicles to the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia for its current engagement with Yemen, that he would denounce an illegal invasion. And it's quite interesting. I mean, you never, if you had the United States held to the same standard, as with Taiwan, which I'm sure I'll get into, Taiwan, for example, it's an island, only like 100 kilometers off of the coast of mainland China. I'm not gonna look it up; it's not worth it. But if you look at the United States, nobody is, crying about the people of Puerto Rico, or nobody, at least in mainstream contemporary circles, criticizes the historical role of the United States in the Philippines, a group of an archipelago, that's the word, which is completely across an ocean, the largest ocean on Earth. Nobody criticizes the United States' administration of Hawaii. There might be liberals here and there who criticize it, for reasons probably pertaining to white guilt. However, there's such a double standard. The only reason that the United States doesn't get any flack for it is because it's not currently engaged in the acquisition of these lands. Uh, I'm sure that even if let's say, the United States launched some invasion of Cuba, uh, you know, someone gets it in their head that we need to liberate these people from their evil communist government, no one would bat an eye. You'd probably see hashtag SOS Cuba trending again, and the people who are going to support it are going to support it. So, let's make me big again. So it's kind of, my position hasn't changed. If you're expecting it to change, it hasn't. I think that the nuclear threats are vigorously overhyped. This is not to say that Russia is the good guy. I don't think there's any good guy in this conflict. But there is a worst guy, which I think is the United States and its overseeing of the NATO strategy of this conflict, and the broader NATO strategy over the past few decades of encircling Russia, of whittling away at its territory whenever possible, and so on. So that's not going to talk about that anymore. Taiwan. I got quite a scare. I was quite scared when Pelosi went to Taiwan. I think everyone should have been. It's an open provocation. As for Taiwan, my comments here will be pretty short. Taiwan has been agreed for since 1946, I believe, to be a part of China. The One China policy. This was agreed upon by basically every nation on Earth, with the exception of, was there even an exception? China. Britain. Of course. How are we going to sell opium to them if they're part of you guys? Anyways, I'll leave it at that, honestly. I mean, again, it's a country which exists very, very close to the maritime border of mainland China. There's a pretty good case to be made for its administration being conducted by China. I have little else to say about it. It's interesting. It was about a month ago, I believe. Maybe a little longer. Maybe September. That I read about. So there was a plotted killing. The FBI, I believe, they caught an assassin who was trying to plot to kill the one responsible for, I think it was Bolton? I think it was John Bolton. Someone plotted to kill John Bolton, an Islamic militant, in retaliation for the illegal drone bombing of Qasem Soleimani in Iraq. He was an Irani general, it doesn't matter. And there was a press conference about it in which they had the spokesperson basically proclaim that this is a wanton violation of international law, of international decency. I actually have the quote somewhere. Let me find it. Just a moment. Okay. So he said, "We face a rising threat from authoritarian regimes who seek to reach beyond their own borders to to commit acts of repression, including inside the United States. I doubt the authority of your government if people are able to do that, but this is an especially appalling example of the government of Iran perpetrating egregious acts of transnational violence in violation of U.S. laws and our national sovereignty. Who does that sound like to you? Violation of national sovereignty. Now, violation of U.S. laws. Now, to be clear, plotting to kill a political figure is illegal, but it's illegal everywhere. Any state would react like this, of course. That is not what I'm criticizing. However, to say that transnational violence, to denounce authoritarian regimes who seek to reach beyond their own borders to commit acts of repression, the emperor doesn't see his new clothes. It's really quite ironic. I just wanted to bring that up. The victims of American aggression, I really wish that they'd be able to read this. They would either laugh or just completely despair in this sort of tone deafness of this quote. This is from, I should attribute this, this is from Assistant Attorney General Matt Olson. After they arrested, the FBI arrested an alleged assassin. He was an Iranian national, I believe. What I see above all, and I'm writing an article about this, by the way, I'll put my Medium page in the description. I have been writing on there. Really what we're seeing is the United States is a dying empire. It's meeting its maker. It may not seem like it. It may seem like it has had some global successes over the past few years. However, what we're seeing is effectively an empire whose culture is degenerating. I'll get into that. I would like to make another thing about Marxist Romanticism and how I've developed it further. That'll come with that. But what we see effectively is much like the late Roman Empire, Western Roman Empire, is an empire sort of flailing, like a bee stinging reflexively upon death to protect its hive. It's effectively how I see it. The United States knows that there are other countries, such as China, which are gaining by the minute more influence in the world. China, for example, everyone fear-mongered about all of those Chinese loans to African countries and the building of infrastructure projects in African countries. Well, a lot of these countries actually defaulted on their loans, and China forgave their debts, which China's very good at doing because it has a lot of money. In fact, in 2008, China forgave a lot of the debts of the United States, as well as Canada. And so, what does debt mean in this regard? Now, there may be debt forgiveness, but if I forgive your debts, you are still, in an unspoken way, and in an unwritten way, still indebted to me for forgiving those debts. And so what we see with China and these countries is not so much a debt trap, as it's commonly referred to in, particularly the BBC writes about this a lot, that it's a debt trap, that's their sort of foreign trade strategy. We see mutual assurance of well-functioning infrastructure that these countries severely lacked in the first place. And we see that, what do these countries, these African countries, bring to China? they bring the development of a further trade network, the further development of a trade network, as well as hegemony in the area. Now, the Soviet Union, back in those days, when it was attempting to take Afghanistan, the Soviet Union could be described not as imperialist but hegemonic. A lot of people did describe it as imperialist. China was social imperialism, and so on. But really, what we see there, given that Afghanistan held the potential wealth of Afghanistan was not very much known back then. We just see a sort of benevolent hegemonic interest. Hegemonic interest, which I need to remind many people was a purely defensive one against the hegemonic strategy of the United States. And so it's sort of a similar phenomenon with China and these African countries. There might be some level of exploitation going on. However, to call it imperialist, to say that China is going to these countries, exploiting the natural resources that they all have, the young workforces that they all have, it's just simply not true. You see Chinese companies entering these areas. However, we see that with the entrance of these companies comes further workers' rights. Anyways, there's a lot going on in the world. I don't have time. I just kind of wanted to make this a half hour, reintroduce myself to this platform, which I forgot that I even had. And yeah, I'm going to try and do this more often. I think that I do have a lot to say. That's not to say that I see myself as some authority on these issues. However, I've studied this stuff for a long time. I'm passionate about it. And I imagine that some people might take a liking to it. As always, check out my writing on Medium. I've got quite a few things. I'll actually open that up. Don't read these all suck. The articles that Medium always recommends are terrible. It's like reading BuzzFeed. I wrote a poem here. Yeah, I wrote that. A lot of these are recycled Facebook posts, to be quite honest. But a lot of them are longer form things. I wrote this on the death of Queen Elizabeth, if you're wondering what I think about that. This is fire. Read this one. I like this one. I was pretty proud of this one. See, a lot of them are pretty short. Don't be lazy. And here's my deconstruction of the current, well, it hasn't been updated, but the recent dealings of Canada with the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in this arms deal. Alright. I will close out now. I don't know why I called this a podcast. I'm going to rename this stream. But I am back. I've returned. Alright. I have no idea what I'm doing. I do want to start a podcast. That is something that's in the cards, but I want there to be guests, because I can't hold the attention of you people for like an hour at a time. That's just out of the question. So, perhaps I'll do some video responses. I want to do What If Altist again, because What If Altist has gone like full race science. He's turned into a complete madman. Um, he's basically just, I don't know. He's like internalized such off ideas about history that I feel like there needs to be something done about him. It's there needs to be this guy. He doesn't really have sources. He just like lists a bunch of books. Probably he's like never read like any of these. He's maybe read like a few pages out of some of them. But then he like just has this like wall of text that's a bunch of sources, and he's like, "Look, I'm smart. Trust me." And then of course people don't check it because who has time, right? Um, all while saying that he is a college dropout and that he has no appreciation for Western academia is ridiculous. Something needs to be said about this guy. Maybe I'll do something like that at some point. All right. Anyways, I hope you all enjoyed this recap of the past few months. I'm sure that you haven't heard this information anywhere else.